want to see in 2013 for the state of Missouri?
He'll be speaking probably for the better part of an hour. Wouldn't be that much if people didn't applaud every other line that he spoke, probably, all of which will mostly be from his side of the aisle. But nonetheless, it'll probably last the better part of 40 minutes to an hour, including all of the applause. But he will be outlining not only his legislative priorities, the issues he wants the General Assembly to work on, he'll be outlining what he wants to spend money on in the next fiscal year that starts July the 1st. So it's a combination of budget address, state of the state address. It wasn't until about the 1980s that we actually had one address. Up until then, there were two. There was a state of the state, and then there was a budget address a little bit later. So the governors no longer give two speeches. We get it all in one big thing right now. And within the last couple of hours, the press corps here at the Capitol has been briefed on what's going to be in the speech. We've been briefed on the proposed budget that he'll make. We can't talk specifics. We can talk some generalities based on what he said earlier, and give people a little bit of an idea of what it is that's going to be coming up during this speech tonight. And at the appropriate time, as people file in, we'll be switching inside the chamber so that folks can actually watch the speech. The governor will lay out a pretty ambitious legislative agenda. He has already laid out some priorities, and we know that from touring the state, saying this is what I want to talk about. And we have an idea of how much money there's going to be, which is not a whole lot, but more than we've had in the past. So he's going to be talking about all of that. People might be seeing folks going in behind us here. This is the House chamber, which is just over my shoulder to the left and straight ahead of you. And that's where the session will be held. It's a joint session of the legislature. The Senate comes over and sits on folding chairs. House members are there. There'll be various other dignitaries, Supreme Court justices, department heads, First Lady will be there. Various other people are going to be involved, but they'll be spectators as the governor gives his speech.
The Senate is located actually over to our left, and some senators have been walking over from here over to the House to get their seats ready because we're less than 15 minutes away. Now, Bob, you mentioned earlier some of the media have been briefed about what the governor is going to talk about, not only at the governor's mansion at a little after 4:30. The governor actually spoke with members of the media, although not allowed to talk about specifics. That's supposed to come out when he gives his speech. But also the state's budget director, Linda Lubring, has also been talking with members of the media. Now, you were in that meeting. Without getting into specifics, what are some of the things that she talked about?
Well, let me first of all do some visual aids here so that you can see what we're talking about when we talk about a $24 billion budget. First of all, here is a 16-page summary of the things that the governor is going to talk about in the State of the State address. Now, this is a pretty gaily decorated piece of work, and it's mostly a big pat on the back to Jay Nixon is what this publication is all about. Then we have the state budget. That's 16 pages. I don't know how many pages there are in this thing, but it goes through line by line how much the governor is proposing the legislature spend in all of the state agencies, all the departments, all the boards and commissions, and it's expected to total somewhere in the neighborhood of $24 billion. Now, of that $24 billion, only about a third is from general revenue. In other words, those are the taxes that we pay here in Missouri. And a big chunk, I'm sorry, about a third of it's federal money. A big chunk of it is from the taxpayers of Missouri, and then another big chunk of it is in dedicated taxes that are earmarked for specific purposes. Let me get that out. And that means that the gas tax, for example, that we pay is earmarked for highways and transportation. There's a special conservation sales tax that goes to the conservation department. There are a lot of other taxes we pay that are earmarked. So all of those things are in this big book too. And so the governor he's not going to go through the whole book with them tonight, but he is going to lay out in general some of the things he wants to talk about. And we know from his past speeches, as he's toured the state talking about his priorities, we know he's going to talk about more money for education. He's going to put more money in, or propose more money, for elementary and secondary education. But even at that, it's expected that he'll be well below, and the state will continue to be well below the targets that it set in 2005 for school funding. When the legislature enacted a new school funding formula that decides how much money goes to school districts from the state, it decided to fund it in at steps in 7 years. Well, we couldn't do that about 4 years ago because of the economy.
Right.
And we now are an estimated $450 million below that target. And I heard Kurt Schaefer, the Senate Appropriations Chairman from Columbia, the other day say that he expects after the governor makes his remarks, we're still going to be $600 million short of the goals that the state set for funding elementary and secondary education 8 years ago now. So we know that we're going to be real short on that. He wants to spend more money on pre-kindergarten education, early childhood education. Probably Head Start might get some more money than it's had in the last year or so, and that's a program that started here. Governor Bond, and in the early 1980s, when he took office and then had a son, created the Parents as Teachers program. And that's been very popular, and it's had its ups and downs with funding.
Especially recently, too.
Right, and so I think we might see a little bit of a boost for some preschool things like Head Start and Parents as Teachers. So we're going to look for that. We can also expect him to have some jobs proposals in his proposed State of the State message or his budget, and he should be. We expect him to come down the hall here soon to join the committee that will escort him in. So you'll probably see him over our shoulders.
Now, you mentioned the word proposal earlier.
Yep.
These are just guidelines for the state legislature.
Right.
And as we all know, the state legislature is dominated by the party that is not headed up by Governor Jay Nixon. So
Right.
what is this going to mean, and what kind of reception is this speech going to have in a General Assembly that is dominated by Republicans?
Well, as I said earlier, the applause is going to be coming from the from the Democratic side of the chamber. And the Democrats have about 1/3 of the members of the legislature, actually less than 1/3 right now. So we'll expect the applause to come from that side. And we will expect a lot of skepticism from the Republicans. After the speech, Speaker Tim Jones will have a response on behalf of the Republican Party, and he will be probably outlining things that he thinks the Republicans should be pushing that will probably differ from what the governor's recommending. And we've already heard some people indicate that they're not too impressed with some of the things he's been pushing of late. So we know there's going to be a lot of disagreements. There's a deadline in early May for the legislature to finish working on the budget. It has to be done a week before final adjournment. And so in early May, we'll find out what the legislature has decided the budget is going to be. The old saying here is that the governor proposes and the legislature disposes. And so the governor's proposing tonight. The bell that you're hearing in the background is the quorum call bell that is summoning members to the House chamber. They ring that bell when there's a vote. And for example, they'll be voting present tonight in the House chamber. The roll will be taken of members of the Senate. It'll be a verbal vote. The House takes its votes on a big scoreboard up front. So the bell rings to summon them to the chamber. The bell rings to say we're going to have a vote. And that's what's going on behind us. Some of the procedures and processes leading up to a meeting of the General Assembly and a joint session as we're going to have tonight.
You mentioned Speaker Tim Jones. He is going to be giving the Republican response following the governor's speech. You will be able to see that also on KMIZ-TV, which is where you're going to be watching the governor's State of the State address. You can also see the Republican response on Missourinet.com as well as ABC17news.com. So give us a sense of what it's been like here in the Capitol in terms of if Republicans will actually, because they have a veto-proof, pretty much majority, they have a veto-proof majority, are they going to follow what the governor is saying, or are they just going to go out on their own and say, okay, here's what we're going to do?
No reason why this year should be any different than any other year. Even when the Democrats controlled and there was a Democrat governor, the governor came in, made his recommendations, and then the legislature did whatever it wanted to do. Here's another thing that you have to think about. The state budget is an ongoing process that began actually last year, October, summer, when state agencies were first asked to start giving estimates of what they wanted. Then it all rolled through October, November, into December. That's when the governor's people really got down to it and started working on a specific plan. Here we are in January. Now, we have February, March, April, and May, and a lot of things can happen economically, socially. Who knows what can happen between now and then? Congress might do something. And so that could put a whole new cast on this budget. What happens in Washington? We were talking to Linda Lubring a couple of weeks ago, and I asked her how much the uncertainty of the budget cuts that Washington is talking about undermines the confidence they have in putting together a budget. And she said, well, that's a big unknown. And so a lot of things can happen in Washington and can have a big impact here on this whole process.
You've been talking with Linda Lubring for quite some time. What is her feelings as the state budget director concerning the state's fiscal household, so to speak? It has to be somewhat better than the way she was talking, let's say 2008, 2009, 2010.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I talk to her every month when the new income numbers come out, the state income numbers. And for the last several months, they've been looking more and more positive. The economy is improving. And so she is feeling much better all the time about how we're going. We're not back up to where we were in terms of raw numbers in 2008, fiscal 2008, which is 2007 and 8. So we have that situation now where we're still trying to get back to where we were, and we're not there yet, I don't think. But so we still have to exercise something Governor Nixon likes to refer to as fiscal discipline. And he's referred to that regularly throughout all of our interviews with him, all of the discussions we've had. Fiscal discipline. He's not going to back any tax increases. There's a bond issue idea that's floating out there that members of the legislature and others have been talking about. We might get some specifics on that tonight. So we're going to just see a lot of things that have been rumbled about here for some time. We'll get some specifics. Over
at the when the governor was talking with the media over at the governor's mansion, you know, he mentioned things like education and its impact on the economy, things like tourism, Medicare expansion. Obviously, with the Affordable Health Care Act that was passed, every state house across the country is going to have to talk about health care at one point or another, and this obviously is not exempt of doing that. This house will also have to do that.
Medicaid expansion is going to be one of the big fights the governor is going to have to wage in this legislative session. He's been out thumping the tub throughout the state, trying to drum up local support from people back home who can apply some pressure to the representatives and senators who come down here. And so he's trying to get a grassroots movement. But the members of the General Assembly, the Republican side, first of all, they don't like the health care overhaul law to begin with. And they don't much trust Washington, which says we'll pay 100% of this expansion for the first 3 years. They don't really trust Washington to carry out that promise. So the governor's going to have to really work hard to get enough Republicans to join with his Democrats to pass the Medicaid expansion, which could mean 300,000 more low-income Missourians will be covered by the program. People whose family of 4 earns up to, I think, $32,000 a year, about that amount. And they would become eligible under the expansion. Well, he's got to fight that battle. It's going to be a tough battle for him to win, if he's going to win it. So that's one of the big things that's on his priority list. One of the things he's going to have to work hardest to get
House members and senators look like they have filed in. We are expecting the governor really at any moment now to be coming down the hallway here to address the General Assembly of the state of Missouri. We are going to actually leave you from ABC 17 and go over to KMIZ-TV. That is where you can watch live coverage of Governor Jay Nixon's State of the State address. If you are watching also on Missourinet.com or ABC17news.com, stay with us right here. We will stay and show you the State of the State address right there. So, Bob, it should be very interesting. I think we're all been kind of wondering since the election what the governor is about to say, and we're getting close to really hearing that. Well,
this is the time when he opens the Christmas package and tells everybody what's in it for them throughout the state of Missouri. So we're going to be waiting to hear those specifics, and that's what, you know, he was very general in Inauguration Day. You and I sat out in the cold and listened to that. Now we get to the specifics of the things he was talking about, and he talked about jobs and so on and so forth. So we're going to find the specifics tonight.
We will see you over on KMIZ-TV. We're going to reset it there and to watch the State of the State address as Governor Jay Nixon addresses the joint session of the Missouri General Assembly. We'll see you there.
ABC 17 News on KMIZ-TV starts now.
Welcome inside the Missouri Capitol for live coverage of Governor Jay Nixon's 2013 State of the State address alongside MissouriNet's Bob Priddy. I am ABC 17's Ryan Tate. Thanks for joining us on KMIZ-TV. If you are also watching us on ABC17news.com or Missourinet.com, we'd also like to welcome you. We are just literally a couple of minutes away from actually seeing Governor Jay Nixon walk down the hallway here on the 3rd floor of the Missouri Capitol and into the House chambers where he is about to talk to the joint session of the Missouri General Assembly. And Bob, you know, kind of give us a sense of what are we going to see from the governor tonight?
We're going to see the governor get more specific about the broad general topics he's been outlining for the last several months. He spoke about some of these broad general topics on Inauguration Day, but tonight we get real specific. We'll hear about specific programs that he wants the legislature to enact or expand or maybe cut, and we'll hear about some specific points where he wants more money to be spent. And he probably will have some cuts to announce too, whether it's in various programs or, for the last several years he's cut state employees. We'll find out if he's going to cut some more, eliminate more state jobs. And so we're going to get those specifics from him tonight that we haven't gotten before in more general terms when he's been on the road or when he's been here.
About an hour and a half ago, you were able to sit in and talk to Missouri Budget Director Linda Lubring. Kind of give us a sense of where she is right now. It has to be a lot better in that office than it was, let's say, in 2009 and 2010 when they were trying to put together a budget with absolutely no money.
Actually, exactly right. And she feels a whole lot more comfortable with where they are now. And so she outlined the full budget to us, and once again, let me show it to the folks here. This is what the budget document looks like. Nice cover, and I don't know how many pages it is, but it does take 16 pages just to summarize it. So this is where he explains, or where the budget office explains everything that is in this budget. And it's all the departments and all of the state agencies are right there. So there's roughly $24 billion worth of expenditures in here.
And give us a sense. Well, I was over at the governor's mansion as he was talking to the media. He talked about wanting to increase, education funding and how education affects the economy. He talked about tourism. He talked about Medicaid expansion. These are things that we will then see how the state legislature takes these guidelines and see if they actually want to implement them or whether they're just going to go off on their own and here's the budget we're going to put together.
Right. The legislature, once the governor makes his proposal, the only thing he can do then is try to twist some arms, persuade people to do some things he wants to do.
Will he do that? I've talked to some representatives and senators who aren't happy with the fact that the governor really doesn't get that much involved. Will he start getting more involved, considering that, he's now term limited?
I think we have the feeling that he and the legislature are going to work a little bit more closely together. For one thing...
And there's the governor behind us right now.
There he goes.
He is being escorted in. And he is starting to shake hands with the welcoming committee, getting ready to address a joint session of the Missouri legislature. It's going to take him a few minutes, though, to get from this door into the podium.
Down the aisle to the podium. So, but he'll be... where were we now?
We were talking about where we are in terms of the funding and whether the General Assembly will actually take what the governor is saying or not.
They'll take a lot of what he says, and they'll make a lot of changes too, because a lot of things can happen between now and May when the budget has to be done. So we'll be watching to see what the legislature does during these next 4 months as they basically write their own version of the state budget. But there'll be a lot of things that they agree with the governor on. There are some major things that they won't agree very much on. At this point, Medicaid expansion is going to be one of the big ones. Tax credit reform is going to be another one. And how you use the money that we save from tax credit reform. Where will we spend that money? So some decisions will have to be made on that, and the governor might recommend some things tonight during his State of the State speech.
And it will be interesting to see how much he gets involved with legislators, because at this point, and it's not going to change in the next 2 years, it is a very heavily Republican-dominated state capitol building, and we'll see how the Republicans work with Governor Jay Nixon to see if we can, come to some sort of compromise on the budget.
And it's early in the session, so we can expect people to be saying nice things about one another, and yes, we'll work together.
This isn't May.
We'll see how long it lasts.
We absolutely will see how long it lasts. It looks like everyone is still just kind of waiting to get the official word as the governor decides to walk in and address the joint session of the Missouri Capitol, the Missouri legislature. A couple of other things, Bob, that was very interesting is that we really haven't increased the budget much.
We haven't.
In the last couple of years. It has been around the $24 billion mark. Anything interesting that we can't get into specifics yet until the governor gives his speech, but anything interesting that you heard from his budget director about, well, maybe what we can expect? And the governor is walking in.
The governor is walking in right now. So, we can expect a $300 million pitch on Medicaid expansion. Or not, 300,000 more Missourians will be covered by Medicaid expansion. We can expect some education funding. More funding for elementary and secondary education, but still be below where we were several years ago. And we'll be hearing another series of adjustments in various programs he's making, taking some from here, putting some from here. We got a little bit more money now that we can spend on some things, so there's going to be some disagreements on how we're going to spend the additional money. That's all going to happen between now and May.
And what kind of response do you think we are going to see from the Republicans? As you can see the Republican response right here on MyZoo-TV, as well as ABC17news.com and Missourinet.com. House Speaker Tim Jones is going to give it. What do you think we're going to hear from Republicans?
I think we'll get a fairly cool reception, and that's not unusual. The opposing party always gives a cool reception to what the governor proposes.
Well, the doors are closing behind us. The governor is moving over to the podium to speak, to talk to the. And he is up on stage right now. Let's go to Governor Jay Nixon as he addresses the Missouri legislature.
Ladies and gentlemen, the governor of the great state of Missouri, the Honorable Jay Nixon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, President Pro Tem Dempsey, Speaker Jones, judges of the Missouri Supreme Court, Lieutenant Governor Kinder, state officials, members of the legislature, members of my cabinet, and my fellow Missourians. This evening, it is my pleasure to be joined by the love of my life, Missouri's outstanding First Lady, Georgianne Nixon. And our son, Jeremiah. Good to see you, Jer. Before I begin to lay out our state's agenda for the year, I would like to thank the people of Missouri for the privilege of serving a second term as governor. I am grateful for your continued trust and support and the opportunity to lead our great state forward. Now, looking around this chamber tonight, I see folks with different backgrounds, different ideologies, and different interests. But whatever our small differences may be, we are united in a common purpose: to serve all the people of Missouri, to make their lives better, and to make life better for our children and grandchildren. These past 4 years, Missouri has weathered historic challenges, from nearly double-digit unemployment to the tornado in Joplin. But together, we met each challenge with courage and conviction and moved our state forward. That makes me proud to be a Missourian. That makes me more optimistic than ever about our future. Because the people of the Show Me State know how to work together. And once our minds are made up, nothing can stop us. That's who we are. That's what we do. Now, some who answer the call of service put their lives at risk to protect the lives of others. They serve here at home whenever danger and disaster threaten. They serve in perilous outposts in every corner of the globe to defend our freedom and liberty. We call them heroes. They make us proud. Last December, I again had the opportunity to visit our troops in Afghanistan and Kuwait. One of them is with us tonight. Sergeant Joseph Schicker served with the Guard's agribusiness development team in Afghanistan. Just hours after his team arrived at their base, Taliban insurgents attacked. In successfully repelling the attack, several Missouri Guardsmen, including Sergeant Schicker, were wounded. For his part in the battle, Sergeant Schicker received the Combat Infantry Badge and the Army Commendation Medal with Valor. I personally had the high honor of pinning Sergeant Schicker with the Purple Heart during the ADT's Welcome Home ceremony in September. Sergeant Schicker, you represent every man and every woman who has ever fought to defend our great nation in every era and on every field of battle. Will you please stand with all the members of our military past and present and accept the heartfelt gratitude of your state. In the last 4 years, we've overcome our share of challenges. Missouri was hit by unprecedented natural disasters. We came together to help our neighbors hit hard by twisters and ice storms, floods and drought. In the grip of an historic recession, we did what every family in Missouri did. We tightened our belts and cut spending. Together, we balanced the budget while holding the line on taxes. We dramatically reduced the size of state government while making it more efficient. We protected our spotless AAA credit rating, and unlike most states, we did it without reaching into taxpayers' wallets or putting it on the credit card. And you know what? It worked. As a result, our economy is moving forward. Last year, Missouri employers added more than 40,000 new jobs. 40,000. We're exporting more goods than ever before, training more workers than ever before, and bringing Missouri's auto industry back to life. Two weeks ago, on the day after my inauguration, I went back to Detroit to meet with auto suppliers and manufacturers. We got our first good look at the Ford Transit, one of the fantastic new vehicles we're going to build right here in the Show Me State. A top Ford exec said that if we hadn't come together during that special session 2 years ago, the Claycomo plant would have closed. That would have put those 4,000 workers out of a job and pushed Missouri's auto industry to the brink. Instead, automakers are investing more than $1.5 billion in Missouri, creating thousands of jobs at the Ford plant in Claycomo, the GM plant in Wentzville, and suppliers in every corner of our state. Yeah. By coming together in that special session, we saved Missouri's auto industry. So when the skeptics say that nothing gets done in this building, or when the press writes that the two parties can't come together, think of those workers and their families. And remember, what we do here really matters. And that same spirit is needed now more than ever to keep Missouri moving forward. Together, we've kept our fiscal discipline, and our economy is gaining ground. We now have a unique opportunity to build a better future for our children. We must seize it. And nothing will have a greater impact on our children's future than the commitment we make now to their education. So in my budget, we increase funding for education, and we increase it by $150 million. That's $17 million more for early childhood education. That's $34 million more for higher education. And that's $100 million more for our K through 12 classrooms. Our children are our first priority. They are Missouri's future. Now, of course, with increased funding come higher expectations. We expect better test scores, better graduation rates, more college degrees, and more Missourians ready to compete for the best jobs in the global economy. We've all got to do better. And that means everybody, students and teachers, parents and principals, coaches and college presidents. Increased funding means increased accountability. And we know the early years of a child's life are especially critical. Over the past few weeks, I've visited preschool classrooms in Greenville, Nixon, Parkway, and St. Joseph. Local communities committed to giving their kids a strong foundation for lifelong learning. And the first official business of my second term was to meet with leaders in preschool education. We discussed ways to ensure that every young child comes to school ready to learn and ready to succeed. The clear consensus: early childhood education is a smart investment with a big return. We want every child in every Missouri community, no matter their family's circumstances, to get the best possible start. That's why, with that increase of $17 million, we'll more than double funding for our Missouri preschool program and put more money into programs like Early Head Start. Move kids forward early. Tonight, we are fortunate to be joined by the St. Louis Preschool Teacher of the Year, Linda Smith of Dewey International School. Joining her is St. Louis Public Schools Superintendent, Dr. Kelvin Adams. Under Dr. Adams' strong leadership, the St. Louis schools have made steady progress over the past 5 years as they work to earn full accreditation. That kind of progress is only possible when everyone pulls together towards a shared goal. Mrs. Smith, Dr. Adams, please stand. Thank you for your lifelong commitment to our children. Now, in the past 4 years, our schools have made steady gains. Math scores are up. Reading scores are up. And I'm proud to report that Missouri's high school graduation rate is now the 7th highest in the nation. But we must commit to even higher goals. That's why my budget includes $100 million in new funding for our K-12 classrooms. We'll use it to train more teachers, modernize equipment, and lengthen the school year. Right now, Missouri has the 4th shortest school year in the nation. Adding 6 more days to the next school year will give teachers more time to work with their students and give kids more time to learn. But we won't stop at K-12. This year will help even more Missouri families afford college. Now, that's been a top priority of mine since day one. On my watch, we led the nation in holding down the cost of tuition. But the cost of college is still out of reach for too many Missouri families, and too many students who do attend college graduate with crushing debt. That's why my budget includes more than $75 million for our Access and Bright Flight scholarships. And it increases funding for our A+ scholarships, which cover tuition and fees at all our public community colleges. To qualify for an A+ scholarship, high school students must keep their grades up, have excellent attendance, and stay out of trouble. Since I've been governor, we've expanded the A+ program to 150 more schools, but there are still schools that aren't part of the A+ program. So their students can't even apply for A+ scholarships. That's unfair to these kids, and we're going to fix it. This is the year we will expand our A+ scholarship program to every public high school in the state. so that every qualified student in this state has the opportunity to go to community college tuition free. Now, the dream of a college education should be within reach for all Missouri families, because education is the best economic development tool there is. While our colleges and universities are doing a great job and graduating more students than ever before, we're also holding these schools to higher standards than ever before. 2 years ago, I convened a summit to lay out my agenda for higher education. I challenged the leaders of all our public 2- and 4-year institutions to develop a new funding model based on performance. And that's what we did. My budget includes an increase of $34 million for higher education, but instead of funding schools based merely on what they've received in the past, we'll tie new funding to specific performance goals, like increased student retention, higher graduation rates, and improved learning. We will achieve higher academic goals with greater accountability. Yes, we will. Now, we made it our mission to help more high school students graduate, go to college, complete their degrees, and enter the workforce. That's the traditional path. And I'm glad more students are taking it. But there are nearly 750,000 Missourians who started college but never completed their degrees. They left school, got jobs, started families, moved on with their life. At this point, some of these folks may feel that going back to college is too expensive or too hard to juggle with work and raising kids. I want to change that and help these adult students finish the degrees they started years ago so they can get better jobs and meet their full earning potential. This year, we'll do more to help these adult students finish their degrees online from an accredited university that's putting down new roots in Missouri. Let me tell you about its history. In 1995, 19 governors came together to provide a realistic option to help adult students complete their degrees at an affordable price. They founded Western Governors University, a nonprofit institution that offers bachelor's and master's degrees in 4 areas Missouri employers are looking for: business, healthcare, teacher preparation, and information technology. It's designed to meet the needs of real people with real lives. You can take your tests after work or on weekends or at night after the kids are asleep. Instead of paying tuition by the credit hour, students can take as much coursework as they want for a flat rate. And how quickly you earn your degree depends on how quickly you master the subject matter. You advance at your pace. The point is that with today's technology, we can make it easier than ever for folks to finish their degrees without disrupting their lives and help them move up the economic ladder. In the past 3 years, Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels and the states of Texas and Washington have established WGU in their states. And starting this year, we will begin enrolling students at WG Missouri. We'll be helping Missourians who never finished college, who are underemployed, and who need degrees to move up, reach their full potential. Now, that's a mission we can all get behind. Now, throughout state government, we've applied business principles to make the most efficient use of taxpayer dollars, cutting waste, doing more with less, making better use of technology. And as a result, the state workforce is now the smallest it has been in 19 years. From the time I became governor to the end of fiscal year 2014, we will have reduced the size of state government by 4,500 positions and cut $1.8 billion in state spending. We've sharply cut energy use, sold off surplus property, and reduced lease space. We put more state services online, from license plates to child support. And in addition to applying business principles to make state government more efficient, we must use those same principles to make government more business-friendly. Now, Missouri is already rated one of the top 10 best states to do business because of things like our low tax rates, low workers' comp rates, low energy costs, and strong workforce. But talk to small business owners and they'll tell you there's still too much red tape, too many bureaucratic hurdles. We hear those concerns and we're doing something about it. First, we need to streamline Missouri's economic incentive programs, and there are a lot of them, so that they're easier to use and understand. Second, we need to simplify our convoluted environmental permitting process. Currently, business owners must go to as many as 6 different commissions at the Department of Natural Resources to get permits, and that's before they turn the first shovel of dirt. We need to consolidate those commissions into one to help businesses grow and create jobs. And while we're at it, I propose we eliminate another 10 commissions at DNR that are redundant and unnecessary. We can take these common sense steps to cut red tape for businesses without backing off our commitment to protecting our air, land, and water, which we will. We also must address the second injury fund. This year, let's work together to solve this issue for the benefit of Missouri workers and employers. This is the year to get that done. In a highly competitive global economy, employers need access to a highly skilled, well-trained workforce. That's why I've made it a top priority to give Missouri workers the skills they need to compete for the jobs of tomorrow. Since I've been in office, we've dramatically increased our investment in worker training, helping 150,000 Missouri workers sharpen their skills and get better jobs in their field. So once again, my budget increases funding for workforce training that's custom tailored to the needs of Missouri employers. Investing in Missouri worker skills, that's real economic development. But job training doesn't just happen in the classroom or on some work site. Some of Missouri's best workers got their training serving us in the armed forces. Helping our veterans get work when they come home is not only honorable and patriotic, it's good for Missouri businesses. If you're looking for an employee who shows up early, stays late, works hard all day, and knows how to overcome adversity, hire a veteran. In 2010, we launched Show Me Heroes. We've asked every employer in the state to reach out, recruit, and interview veterans first for new job openings. I'd like to thank all the legislators in this room who helped us strengthen this program by adding job training so our veterans can re-enter the civilian workforce quickly and be even more successful on the job. More than 2,700 employers have signed the Show Me Heroes pledge, putting more than 4,000 of our proud Missouri veterans to work. And tonight again, I call on every Missouri business to go to our website at mo.gov. It only takes a minute and take that Show Me Heroes pledge, because it's not enough to honor and support our service members abroad. We must honor and support them at home with jobs that are worthy of their skills and work ethic. Now, for the third straight year, I am proud to report that we are shipping more Missouri goods around the world than ever before. Missouri exports hit record levels in 2010 and topped the $14 billion mark with double-digit growth in 2011. And we're on track to break records again. That's because we're taking a proactive approach. In October of 2011, I led a group of Missouri business leaders on a highly successful trade mission to China. We secured agreements to sell $4.6 billion in Missouri goods. In April of 2012, we went to Brazil and signed our first ever trade agreement with the state of Sao Paulo. the financial capital of one of the world's fastest growing economies. And this coming March, I will lead a trade mission to South Korea and Taiwan. We're making this a priority because it's critical for every business in the state, no matter how small, to think globally. Because companies that once only did business with customers around the corner are finding new customers around the world. And when we sell more Missouri products overseas, we're creating more jobs right here at home. That's why my budget includes $2.3 million to enter new markets, expand foreign trade, and help Missouri businesses develop a worldwide customer base. Now, one of our export superstars comes from one of Missouri's oldest family-owned businesses, Volpe Foods in St. Louis. Next time, it's your district. Next time you're in St. Louis, stop by their shop on the Hill. Volpe is a prime example of a traditional business that, with visionary new leadership, has broken the mold. With the help of our Departments of Agriculture and Economic Development, Volpe has doubled its exports in growing markets like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Costa Rica. Representing all Missouri exporters, please welcome the CEO of Volpe Foods, Lorenza Passetti from St. Louis. Lorenza. Now, there's no doubt that Missouri is ready to meet the challenges of a global economy. But quite frankly, the biggest economic decision facing our state right now is how to move forward on health care. This isn't the time to reopen the debate or re-argue the merits of the President's health care plan. I had some problems with it, and I know many of you did as well. But Congress passed it, the President signed it, and the Supreme Court upheld it. It's the law of the land. And it's not within our power to rewrite federal laws, even if we wanted to. It is within our power. It is our responsibility to now do what's right for Missouri. And the question before us is a narrow one. Will we bring the tax dollars that Missourians send to Washington back home to strengthen our Medicaid system here in Missouri? Or will we let the tax dollars that Missourians send to Washington be spent in other states instead? Other states would get the benefits, we'd get the bill. The answer is clear. The people of Missouri deserve to see their tax dollars come back to their communities. Friends, let's put the politics of healthcare aside for just a moment and look at this as a business decision for the state of Missouri. The Missouri Chamber of Commerce supports the Medicaid expansion, not because they're big supporters of this president and his agenda, but because it's the smart thing to do. They know that bringing billions of dollars back to Missouri is good for our state's economy. The Kansas City Chamber of Commerce has endorsed the Medicaid expansion. So have the chambers in Independence, Springfield, Lee's Summit, and St. Louis. So have the Civic Council of Greater Kansas City, Kirksville-Ready, and our friends at the Associated Industries of Missouri. Would these leaders from these business organizations who have joined us tonight because of the importance of this issue, please stand. Thank you for your leadership for our state. Now, for these business leaders, this is not a political decision. It's an economic one. And we shouldn't let last year's politics get in the way of next year's economic growth. Moving forward with this plan will bring a total of $5.7 billion to Missouri for the first 3 calendar years at no additional cost to our state. The University of Missouri estimates this will generate an additional 24,000 jobs, and that's just in 2014. We're talking about good jobs for nurses, doctors, pharmacists, therapists, and medical technicians. Strengthening Medicaid will strengthen our economy. Without question, it's the smart thing to do. Now, I know there are some who have voiced concern that Washington will not live up to its commitment. Let me address that directly. I support including a provision that rolls back the Medicaid expansion if Washington doesn't honor its financial commitment. Washington drops the ball, we'll do what's right for Missouri. Quite frankly, we always do what's right for Missouri. And there's a human element to this that just can't be ignored. A stronger Medicaid system will make health care available to 300,000 of our friends and neighbors. Let me be clear about who these people are. They're working Missourians. Folks who work day and night, but simply can't afford health coverage. These are not people who aren't trying or hoping to game the system. They're folks we see every day. Some holding down 2 jobs just to make ends meet. We're talking about a family of 4 with a household income of roughly $32,000 a year. They wait tables and clean office buildings. They cut hair and trim trees. They work in factories and repair cars and trucks. Making it easier for these hardworking Missourians to get basic health insurance, that's the right thing to do. Because these folks can't afford doctor's bills or insurance, they often end up in our hospital emergency rooms because it's the only option for their family. In their shoes, you'd probably do the same thing. It's a terrible way to deliver health care. It drives up premiums for people who do have health insurance, and that must change. I'm well aware this is a tough issue politically, but across the country, we're seeing governors and state legislators put politics aside to do what's undeniably best for their states. Republican governors in places like Arizona, North Dakota, New Mexico, and Nevada are using federal funds to strengthen their Medicaid systems, not because it's the easy thing for them to do politically, but because it's the right thing to do. Here in Missouri, we must make the smart business decision, the right human decision, and bring the tax dollars we send to Washington back to work here in Missouri. On another healthcare front, in recent years, we have seen the tragic consequences when people with serious mental illness don't get the help they need. Right now, many people with severe mental illness only get treatment when they reach a crisis point. That's too late. My budget includes $10 million to help those with mental illnesses get timely, effective treatment in their own communities. That money will be used to provide more services in our community mental health centers, increase mental health first aid training for professionals so they can recognize the early warning signs of mental illness, train law enforcement in mental health crisis intervention, and teach families how to care for loved ones who suffer from severe mental illness. We must do everything in our power to get folks the treatment they need before it's too late. Each day in our state and across the country, tragedies occur that don't make the headlines and often don't get reported at all. I'm talking about domestic violence. Last year, our network of shelters for victims of domestic violence provided safe haven for thousands of women and children. But thousands of others were turned away because the shelters were full. We know that battered women are at greatest risk when they make the courageous decision to leave an abusive partner. Finding shelter can literally make the difference between life and death for these women and for their children. That is why my budget includes a 29% increase in funds to provide more beds, more treatment, more safety at domestic violence shelters throughout our state. No child, no mother who has been the victim of domestic violence should ever be turned away and left to fend for themselves during these moments of crisis. These past 4 years, we have opened new doors for thousands of Missourians with disabilities. I'm passionate about this work, as I know many of you in this room are as well. Together, we passed landmark legislation in 2010 to ensure that children with autism get the medical care they need. Issues like this transcend politics. And now thousands of youngsters are getting the therapy that just a couple of years ago, their families couldn't afford. We will keep moving forward by funding training for more therapists to help even more children with autism lead happier, healthier lives. In October of 2010, we started the Partnership for Hope, and it's already helped thousands of people with developmental disabilities live fuller lives. My budget includes funds to expand this vital program to 1,000 more Missourians, some of whom have spent years waiting for services. By the end of 2014, we'll be serving more than 3,500 people with developmental disabilities, Missourians like Vishal Patel. Vishal is 23. He has a rare form of cerebral palsy and gets around in a motorized wheelchair. For years, Vishal had to crawl or have his parents carry him upstairs in their home just to take a shower. The Partnership for Hope provided Vishal with a stair lift, a roll-in shower, a permanent ramp, and the physical therapy he needs. But as he told me in a letter, his real dream was to get a real job with a real paycheck. The partnership arranged for him to volunteer every Friday night at a movie theater in St. Peter's. And you know what? Vishal did so well that just before Christmas, they offered him that real job with a real paycheck. His first day was January 4th. Vishal represents the many Missourians with disabilities who are now entering the workforce thanks to the Partnership for Hope, and the enlightened business owners who recognize the value of these outstanding workers. Vishal is here tonight with his job coach, Pam Westoff, and Peg Capo, who runs the program in St. Charles County. Please welcome the newest member of Missouri's workforce, Vishal Patel. At the start of my speech, I spoke about unique opportunities and the importance of seizing them. With our perfect AAA credit rating intact and interest rates at all-time lows, we now have a unique opportunity to move forward with a bond issuance. It would allow us to modernize our K-12 classrooms and college research labs, mental hospitals, and state parks. Some of our state's most important buildings need long overdue improvements, including this one. Interest rates today are about half what they were in 1995 when Governor Carnahan issued bonds, and about a third of what they were when Governor Bond did the same in 1983, when interest rates were more than 8%. But the bond issue must be focused on our state's most pressing needs, and we must have a way to pay for it. When we talk about our state's long-term needs, nothing is more important than our schools. A bond issuance will allow the state to establish a permanent low-interest loan fund dedicated to improving our local schools, which is why I am proposing the creation of the BOOST Fund. BOOST stands for Building Opportunities in Our Schools Today. Because, folks, let's not kid ourselves. If we want our children to get a first-rate education and compete in a 21st century global economy, they'll need first-rate 21st century facilities. State-of-the-art computers and science lab, libraries and wired classrooms. The BOOST Fund will go to work in your communities, in schools in every corner of our state. Now, in addition, a targeted bond issuance will provide funds for cutting-edge university research facilities in areas critical to our competitiveness, such as engineering, math, and science. Bond proceeds will also allow us to build a new and improved Fulton State Mental Hospital. We have a moral responsibility to these patients and their caregivers to provide the best possible environment, one that is safe, secure, and conducive to healing. Bonds will also pay to upgrade accommodations in our state parks. It's an investment that will have a big impact on tourism, and tourism is big business in Missouri. Last year, Missouri welcomed 36 million visitors, pumping nearly $11 billion into our state's economy. But we can do even better. Updating our cabins and lodges and building brand new top-of-the-line facilities at our most popular parks will create jobs, help our economy, and make our parks an even bigger draw. Our 87 state parks and historic sites are a priceless legacy that belongs to all of us. Hunting, fishing, hiking, and camping are part of our Missouri way of life. Investing in Missouri state parks today will help preserve our outdoor heritage for our grandchildren and their grandchildren. Now, as I said before, we can only move forward with a bond issuance if we have a way to pay for it. Saying we'll figure it out later won't work. That's not how we became a AAA state. The way to pay for the bond issuance is to finally get our tax credit system under control. We've worked on reining in tax credits for years. In 2010, I appointed a statewide bipartisan tax credit commission to study the issue. That commission tapped the expertise of Missouri leaders in business, education, labor, and government. They recommended a series of pragmatic, fiscally responsible reforms to rein in tax credit expenditures and ensure these programs provide a strong return on taxpayer investment. But 2 years later, these reforms have yet to pass. And the costs of inaction continue to grow. Last year, tax credit redemptions grew to a staggering $629 million. That's 1/12 of our entire general revenue budget. That's not fiscally responsible. This is the year to get comprehensive, fiscally responsible tax credit reform legislation to my desk and get smart, strategic investments to move our state forward. This is the year. Now, but all these ideas and proposals I outlined tonight mean very little if the people of Missouri lose faith in the system. Missouri's ethics laws are among the weakest in the nation. Every year as governor, I put forward my agenda for ethics reform. And I know many of you have made genuine efforts to pass legislation. The list of reforms we must implement is long. Everything from curbing committee-to-committee transfers, to banning office holders from doubling as paid political consultants, to finally closing the revolving door between the legislature and lobbyists. All things we must do. But above all, the single most destructive force to our system is the unlimited sums of money pouring into the campaign accounts of candidates seeking public office. We must reinstitute strict campaign contribution limits. Each time a wealthy individual, or business, or special interest sends a check for $20,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 to a candidate, the public's trust erodes just a little bit more. And eventually, if we continue on this path, there will be no trust left at all. Now, I've led the fight for campaign contribution limits for many years. As Attorney General, I stood before the United States Supreme Court and successfully argued in support of Missouri's contribution limits. And as your governor, I stood before you every year and made the case for them. This year, if the legislature does not send a campaign contribution limit bill to my desk, I will do everything within my power to get it on the ballot and make sure it passes. People of Missouri have voiced their opinion on this matter already at the ballot box, and their support for contribution limits was overwhelming. We all know it would pass again. Let's work together. Let's get it done this session. The era of limited contributions to candidates must end. These past 4 years, we've been faced with some historic challenges. By working together, we've tackled them head on and made great strides in the Show Me State. We've kept our fiscal discipline, balanced the budget, and put strict cost controls in place throughout state government. And as a result, our economy is making solid, steady progress. The signs are everywhere. Businesses large and small are hiring again. Missouri's unemployment rate has been lower than the national average for 40 consecutive months. New building permits are up, personal income is up, and wages are up too. And now we're in a position to make smart, long-term investments that will boost our children's academic achievement, protect Missourians' health, strengthen our workforce, improve our quality of life, and create prosperity for generations to come. We have unique opportunities before us. Now is the time to seize them. Just 2 weeks ago, I stood at the steps of this Capitol and spoke of my vision for the future of our beloved state. a future where all our children can get an education that prepares them to compete for the best jobs in the global economy, where the brightest minds in science and technology advance the frontiers of human knowledge, where business and the arts flourish, where the bounty of Missouri's farms and fields will feed, clothe, and power the planet, and where the natural beauty of our state is preserved and cherished for all time. That future is ours to build, and we can only do it by working together. When I first came to the Capitol in 1987, I was the youngest person in the Senate. I had a lot to learn. And I was fortunate to serve with many dedicated and capable legislators on both sides of the aisle. They showed me what public service is and what it requires of each of us. Republicans and Democrats didn't agree on everything back then, just like they don't now. We had a divided state government with a governor of one party and the other party holding a large majority in the legislature, just like we do now. But we worked together to get things done for the good of the people. I've been in public service for a long time, more than a quarter century. And in those many years, my faith in the people of Missouri has never faltered. My faith in our bedrock values has never wavered. And I have always been mindful of and inspired by the words inscribed on the Great Seal of Missouri, on our flag, and in these marble halls. Let the good of the people be the supreme law. This is our call to action, our common oath and rallying cry. This is our sworn duty. Ours is a sacred calling. Our time is short. Let every action we take in these halls and in the offices of the people's government be guided by that supreme law, the good of the people. Now let us seek God's everlasting grace and protection to finish the good works He has entrusted to our care. God bless Missouri. God bless the United States of America. Thank you and good evening.
Will the escort committee please escort the governor from the chamber?
You have been watching live coverage of Governor Jay Nixon's 2013 State of the State address alongside Missouri-Net's Bob Priddy. I am Ryan Tate. The governor had a lot of things to say that got some response, especially from a small section of the general legislature that was, the General Assembly that was looking at him and listening to him. What were some of the key aspects that you caught out of this, Bob?
Well, there were several aspects that he talked about tonight. One is, as we mentioned before the program, before the speech, he wanted to emphasize funding for education, more funding for jobs programs, more funding for economic development, more funding for services to the elderly and the young people in the schools, the preschools. He also wanted to talk about making some changes in tax credit programs. Those tax credit program cutbacks would be used to finance other things that he wants to talk about. As happens with speeches these days of State of the State, State of the Union, he paused several times to introduce people in the audience. I guess that adds a more human touch to the whole thing. I think that process started with Ronald Reagan with the State of the Union speech in Washington, and so governors have quickly latched onto that, and so we have that. But you're right, the applause seemed to be coming from the 1/3 of the House over on what would be the right-hand side as we look at the
And
back.
there is the governor.
There's the governor coming back out.
Leaving the House chambers, giving us a wave on the side over there as he exits
And head
after
back
the
down to his
state of
office.
heading back to his office after he gave his speech. And the dignitaries and senators and House members are also going to be leaving behind us. Some of the other things I found very interesting. He talked about as governor since 2009, he's cut $1.8 billion from the budget and cut 4,500 state jobs. You mentioned education. He wants more money for the ACE Plus scholarship program, which is for Missouri community colleges, and he wants to expand that to all Missouri high schools, make that accessible for all high school students. Also, especially for mid-Missouri, he wants for a bond proposal that he calls the Boost Bond Proposal Program. He wants some of that money to go to improvements to the Fulton Mental Health Hospital, the Fulton State Mental Health Hospital, because it is much needed.
Yeah, it's in terrible condition. It's a very old hospital to begin with. And we were talking to the budget director, Linda Lubering, just a few minutes before the speech, and some new buildings would go up there, some new heating plants would go there, there would be some renovations made to some old buildings too, but nonetheless there would be a lot of new construction because that place is in really bad shape and they do need to spend a lot of money to renovate it. We're going to be picking up very soon, I hope, the Republican response from House Speaker Tim Jones, so we're going to be kind of filling in, giving you some details of the speech before we go to Tim Jones's remarks as the Republican response. So he did talk a lot about that bond issue. The way he plans to finance that bond issue is with cuts to tax credits. And by saving the money on tax credits, then we can pay off the bonds, he hopes. Well, there's a lot of this budget that is kind of betting on the come, to be honest with you. We asked about that tonight. For example, he's planning on about $10 million coming in from taxes collected on internet purchases. Well, that's involving going to join the streamlined sales tax compact that has about 20 states involved with that. They're collecting a sales tax on things that people buy from eBay and various other places on the internet. The legislature hasn't wanted to do that.
Right.
So we have to see if the legislature is going to buy into that. He also wants to end some property tax credits for renters. He doesn't see why people who rent are getting property tax credits when it's the people who own the property who should get the property tax credits. So by ending the rental tax credits, he generates more money that he can apply somewhere else. Another thing that he wants to do is get $52 million in increase from a tax amnesty plan. He's bounced that idea off the legislature before. The legislature hasn't bought that idea, tax amnesty plan. And one of the reasons, say some of the Republicans, is you don't want to give people the idea that they can go without paying their taxes, and then a few years later you come back and say, oh, if you pay back your taxes a little bit, all is forgiven. That's a wrong message, some of them are saying, that the governor is trying to say to the people who haven't paid their taxes. So we're going to wait and see if the governor gets anything of these ideas through. Plus, he's counting on an awful lot of money from the Medicaid expansion.
Yeah, he is. Nearly $50 million, I think, is what the total is.
Yeah, it's going to be huge, and it's going to serve an awful lot of Missourians, but the legislature, as we talked about earlier, is very reluctant about how it's going to do this, or if it wants to do this. And he made a point of that during his speech, saying, "Oh, we realize some of you don't like the Affordable Care Plan."
It was one of the biggest chunks of his speech.
Yeah.
He talked about the Medicaid expansion. In fact, he used the term "it's the right thing to do" on a number of occasions in the speech, talking about Medicaid expansion, accepting those federal dollars. And he was only getting just response from the Democrat side, from about a third of the General Assembly, because nobody on his right side, on the left side of the viewing gallery, the Republican side, was cheering for that. He made a big point of talking about campaign contribution limits. He wants to see that. He thinks that is a big problem in the state legislature, and that if they don't do something in the House and in the Senate, that he's going to just give it to the voters. He wants to make it as a ballot initiative and let them decide if they want campaign contributions for campaigns.
This would not be the first time we've had a campaign contribution issue go to the voters through a petition drive, and the governor would strongly support that. Now let's remember, the governor got reelected and ran against somebody who put millions and millions and millions of dollars
$7 or $8 million of his own money.
Right,
yeah.
and we had a Senate race too, and the Republican primary, where one of the candidates put millions and millions of dollars of his own money into a campaign. So this is a big issue. And then we had people who are simply writing checks for $150,000 or so to a particular candidate. Well, a lot of people think that doesn't really encourage people like you and me to run for public office if you've got somebody who can just write a check for $150,000 for somebody else.
And then it comes into a freedom of speech issue, and there's a lot of different variables to it. I found it very interesting that he pointed that out. He also talked about a 29% increase in money for more beds, treatment, and safety for domestic violence shelters throughout the state. He made a point of saying that. And going back to the education, you know, he talked about making sure that there are increases for higher education, especially, you know, like the University of Missouri and other community colleges in mid-Missouri, because in recent years they have not been getting that kind of funding.
But there's a difference now, because they're trying to get through a formula that will base funding on performance and how people graduate from these schools, whether they are retained as they work their way through the schools. All of these are going to be factored into performance and the performance-based budget.
House Speaker Tim Jones is now giving the Republican response. Here he is.
Focused on strengthening our state's economy, reforming our education system, and creating opportunity for all Missourians. Missourians also gave their support to Governor Nixon, a self-proclaimed independent, fiscal conservative who has proudly reaffirmed his intention to work with Republicans to keep tax burdens low, government small, and the bureaucratic red tape to a minimum. It was a governor our state rarely saw during his first term in office, but after seeing his newfound approach to governance, I'm cautiously optimistic about working with him in the years ahead. Moments ago, you heard the governor outline his priorities for the upcoming year. While some of the common ground the Republicans he discussed on the campaign trail is still there, many of his new proposals, ones that would create a bigger, more intrusive government bureaucracy, threaten to create a chasm that no amount of bipartisanship can bridge. And in the past, as in tonight, the governor has articulated grand concepts, but provided little detail. Many in the legislature, on both sides of the aisle, are concerned about the governor's pattern of retreating behind rhetoric instead of leading and engaging with us to find solutions. So I challenge the governor, for the good of all Missourians, to break from his past pattern of ivory tower executive isolation, roll up his sleeves and work with us to find common ground. I welcome his participation. In the months ahead, Republican leadership in the House and Senate will work with the governor on the issues the people of Missouri entrusted us to address when they elected us to office. We have profound differences, but we will focus on the places where we may find agreement. Areas like the critical task of improving our state's aging and failing infrastructure. We must work together to make sure our roads and bridges, the essential transportation routes vital to economic development, are maintained, repaired, and when necessary, rebuilt. We also believe it's important to review the effectiveness of our state programs, including Missouri's 61 tax credit programs. Many of these programs accomplish a worthwhile goal, but oversight and accountability are required. We will eliminate the credits that do not work, cap programs at a reasonable level to provide budget certainty, and ensure that taxpayers are protected. And if the governor's leadership is absent, as it has been many times over the past 4 years, or when the proposals he pushes are radically different from the campaign promises he made, we will not hesitate to use our historic majorities that the people entrusted us with to pursue our agenda to reform and transform our state. A prime example is the governor's call to expand the welfare state by adding 300,000 Missourians to the Medicaid rolls. It's a call that has come courtesy of Obamacare in Washington, D.C. It's a call the Republican-led legislature will not answer. 8 years ago, Republican leadership made the difficult but desperately needed decision to rein in a welfare system that was growing at an unsustainable rate. It was a decision that saved the state billions of dollars and staved off almost certain bankruptcy. Today, we are faced with a similar decision. On one side, we have a governor and a federal government that believes bigger government is the answer. They want to take us down a fiscally irresponsible path that will saddle future generations of Missourians with a bill they cannot afford. It's a path Republicans will not follow. Why should we pour billions of your hard-earned tax dollars into a broken system? That would defy basic economic sense. We will not follow the lead of out-of-touch bureaucrats whose reckless spending has pushed our nation to the brink of financial disaster. Instead, Republican leadership will propose a plan to transform our Medicaid system, to repair a broken system so that it works as intended by providing quality care to the neediest Missourians. Republicans have always stood for providing opportunity to those who are truly in need, and that is where your hard-earned tax dollars should be spent. Our commitment is to stay true to the will of the people who have consistently voted with large majorities against the economy-crippling provisions of Obamacare, to find ways to keep the size of government small and to steer our state away from the same kind of fiscal cliff our federal government cannot seem to avoid. We also call on Governor Nixon to stand in support of the many Missouri hospitals that provide care to the and underinsured. The federal government's decision to cut the dish payments that reimburse hospitals for the care they offer is one we must oppose together. This ploy by the White House to force the hands of states like ours to expand Medicaid must be rejected, and we must develop a Missouri solution that will allow hospitals to continue to provide care, one that doesn't require a massive expansion of government that Missouri taxpayers simply cannot afford. Instead of adding more bloat to the bureaucracy, our efforts this year must focus on strengthening Missouri's economy, a goal that requires both short-term and long-term solutions. In the short term, we can improve our business climate and attract new employers and new jobs by making Missouri's employment law standards comparable to national standards. Over the past several years, Missouri's courts have made misguided rulings that have created uncertainty in our legal environment. The result is that compliance is now more difficult for existing employers, and potential businesses are discouraged from setting up shop in a state where frivolous lawsuits are far too common. It's time to put Missouri employers on a level playing field with their competitors around the country, to provide certainty in the legal system that allows businesses to focus on growing their businesses and creating jobs rather than worrying about unnecessary lawsuits. We also must work to protect one of our largest employers in Missouri, the healthcare industry. It is critical that we correct a misguided court decision that opens the door for endless lawsuits with unlimited damages, a decision that will drive doctors out of the state, destroy jobs, and reduce Missourians' access to care. One of our top priorities for this legislative session will be to reform our medical malpractice system so we can close the floodgate of lawsuits that threaten to drive the cost of medical malpractice insurance through the roof and, of course, increase the cost of care. Last year, Kansas enacted sweeping tax reforms that made their state extremely attractive to business and upheld their medical malpractice protections for their healthcare industry. These are the latest shots in what has been a prolonged and successful effort to poach Missouri companies and Missouri jobs, the ongoing economic border war. And if we do not respond to these very real threats, the war could turn into a rout. So we must immediately review our tax code and enact fiscally responsible policies that ensure we remain competitive with our neighboring states. We must also begin steps to secure our future. We must protect our state's education funding and give parents, teachers, and school boards the tools they need to ensure the Missourians of today are prepared for the jobs of tomorrow. It would be short-sighted and irresponsible for Missouri's leaders to place the temporary benefits of entitlement funding ahead of lasting benefits of education. Yet that is exactly what Governor Nixon has done over the past several years. With each speech he has made, the governor has promised the people of Missouri that he will put education first. But as his rhetoric has been replaced with reality, Missourians have seen just how empty his promises are. Each year, it has been the legislature that has shown real leadership on the vital issue of education. In each of the last 3 years, we've sent the governor budgets that placed an emphasis on funding both K through 12 and higher education. Each year, he has responded by withholding millions of dollars from our schools. It was last year the governor asked us to take our funding for K through 12 education to record levels, which we did. At the same time, he asked that funding once again be cut for higher education. The legislature, despite an incredibly difficult budget, made a commitment to not only provide record levels of funding to our elementary and secondary education system, but also to reverse the $106 million cut the governor had proposed for our colleges and universities. And how did the governor respond to our decision? By withholding more than $9 million, effectively cutting higher education funding for a third straight year. And yet, despite these claims that these cuts had to be made to balance the budget, he was able to find nearly $6 million of your tax money to buy a brand new plane. Pledging your commitment to our children and then failing to support them flies in the face of good governance and leadership. Missouri children, our future leaders, deserve more. When it comes to leadership on the issue of education, Governor Nixon's been absent and actively worked against the legislature's efforts to invest in what he claims is his top priority. What's worse, this has happened at a time when Missouri's two largest school districts are failing, as our universities are struggling to find ways to prepare our young people for the jobs of the future. Our children, whether they're born in Springfield, St. Louis, or Sedalia, Kansas City, Camdenton, or Cape, Poplar Bluff, Palmyra, or anywhere in between, deserve access to the highest quality education. But our schools will not be able to provide this level of education if their funding is consistently slashed to the bone to fund an ever-increasing, bloated entitlement system full of waste, fraud, and abuse. Our antiquated, overly bureaucratic system is the antithesis of innovation and excellence. Teachers should be rewarded for their performance and encouraged to boldly engage in the technological innovations that will create the highly skilled workforce of tomorrow that we so desperately need. Finally, we must work to ensure that parents are provided the opportunity to be involved in their children's education. Education cannot just begin and end at the schoolhouse door. It must continue at home, and parents should take an active role in ensuring their children are learning what they need to succeed. This can be accomplished by providing parents more power to intervene in failing school districts and force the necessary changes to ensure access to an effective education. This year, we also must work to improve and better fund our system of mental health. Families across Missouri and across our great nation continue to mourn the loss of the young people at Sandy Hook Elementary who were taken so tragically from us. Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with the families who suffered through this difficult time. But the solution to prevent such tragedies from happening again in the future does not involve trampling on the Second Amendment rights of our citizens. Instead, we must place an emphasis on creating a mental health system that makes care accessible and effective, so that those who might do us harm have the opportunity to receive the kind of help that can put them on a path to triumph rather than tragedy. You can count on Republicans to develop policy solutions that will protect your children, but also protect your rights as Americans. You sent us to Jefferson City for results, and Republicans in the General Assembly are committed to leading a government worthy of the citizens it serves. Whether it's education innovation or labor reform, saving our healthcare industry, or balancing our budget with fairness and equity, the truth has no agenda, and the challenges before us shall require bold leadership and transformational ideas. And if our governor is not up to the demands these times require, your General Assembly is prepared to provide the leadership that is so desperately needed. While our counterparts in D.C. may believe that government has all the answers and that bigger government is better, here in Missouri, we believe that government is not the ruler of the people. It is the people who should rule over their government. Only then will all the people find the freedom and opportunity that will lead them to prosperity. In the coming months, I look forward to working with my colleagues in the Senate, and I hope to work successfully with Governor Nixon to achieve the vision I have outlined this evening, restoring our infrastructure, strengthening our education system, and creating a job-friendly, pro-growth business environment. Together, we can achieve these goals and create a better future, full of opportunity for all Missourians, a place where future generations work, raise their families, and are proud to call home. Thank you for listening this evening. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the great state of Missouri.
You have been listening to the Republican response from House Speaker Tim Jones of Eureka. So Missouri-Net's Bob Priddy, and I'm ABC 17's Ryan Tate. Okay, Bob, so now we have heard from the governor and we have heard from the Republicans. So what's next?
Work. For the next 4 months, this is when they start to just grind out the laws. You know, Mark Twain once said there are two things nobody should ever see: the manufacturing of sausage and the making of laws. Well, the legal sausage now really gets earnest. In fact, the Senate was debating some bills today into the evening. So that's already started from that standpoint. But now the budget work begins. They have something from the governor that they can look at, and they can really work on it and start taking it apart and deciding what they want to do. So over the next 4 months, we're going to start doing a lot of work on the budget. We're going to work on all his proposals, as well as proposals from the senators and representatives. And it will get pretty tense come April around here. but we can expect the real hard work now to fully get underway. We have the biggest budget proposal we've had in many years tonight. The governor proposed a budget of almost $26 billion. That's up from 24.5 last year and 23 and some change a couple of years ago. That's because our economy is getting better. But anytime you have a $26 billion budget, a lot of it is based on bills that he wants the legislature to pass, creating these funds. Then we're going to have some fights. We'll see how all of this shakes out come May.
We certainly will. Bob, thanks a lot for joining us. For Missouri-Net's Bob Priddy, I'm ABC 17's Ryan Tate. Thank you for joining us in the 2013 State of the State Address and Republican Response here at the Capitol.